After a extremely nice offseason for the Louisville men's basketball program, we're explaining why the Cardinals will return to the NCAA Tournament next season. All coming up on today's episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Man, oh man, he is back, man with the plan. Co-founder and editor of CardinalSportsZone.com, Jeremy Wahman, joins us once again. It's been a hiatus, but my guy 55 is back. What's up, brother?
Well, I'm doing. You make me feel short when we do your show because my camera sits so low. It's got to be
short in general, man.
The stuff in the background, but man, I'm happy to be back on here with you again. Every time we collaborate together, it does big things. So let's do some big things.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Speaking of big things, look, let's call it how it is. Jeremy and I both feel like Louisville will be back in the basketball tournament next season. We're going to explain why, but we're also going to go over some common rebuttals as to, why do some believe right now that Louisville might not get back into the field. And then I'll switch things up a little bit. I've only ever done mailbags solo, and I'm going to ask Jeremy these questions that you all have prepared as well. So, Jeremy, right now, let's, identify the elephant in the room. There is still opportunity for Louisville to add to this roster, specifically Coleman Hawkins being a huge talking point, and whether or not he's going to visit at the end of this week. It seems like that rumor is starting to catch smoke. But I think that, there always is a case or a scenario to where Louisville doesn't add anyone else, despite it might seem like they're going to. So we're going to look at it both ways. We're going to start out under the hypothetical that Louisville does not add another player. Why are the Cardinals a tournament team next season?
Well, I think it's a multitude of things. I don't necessarily think – let me rephrase it. I didn't necessarily think that the talent level was upgraded too much, and then I started looking at the numbers, and I was in fact wrong. It was upgraded exponentially. So that's going to be one factor. Coaching, competent coaching from the top. That's going to be another factor. And look, these guys know it's going to be the motivation of knowing you're only going to have one season to play with each other. You've come to save Louisville. You've got the first-year coach. You've got depth. And if we do add the piece that we're talking about, that makes our front court one of the most formidable front courts in the country. If we don't add it, we still have a pretty decent front court, and we've got a bunch of guards that can play guard and forward. And you can really start to venture into positionless basketball if need be. So I just think you add all that stuff up, and it equals success, in my opinion.
And not to mention, I feel like the roster genuinely fits together. Like, I don't feel like it's just a bunch of dudes that were thrown onto the team and you have to, work aimlessly to get these guys to mesh. I think that it's going to take a little bit of time, as will every group that you're having to replace 13 brand new players, or 11, I should say, with 2 red shirts. But I do think that the roster meshes very well. You have complementary skill sets. I don't think that there's one area of, the court that Louisville lacks. Maybe you say rim protection, although I think James Scott will be a backup, 5 in this defense. I think you have a bunch of situational, opportunistic rim protectors like Kason Pryor, like Javon Hadley, like Abubakar Traore, and the list goes on. So I feel like you really can build off this roster. Kelsey going out and having one of the best, if not the best, transfer portal window of any program out there. I think it speaks volumes. And there's a lot of parity in college basketball. So I do think that Louisville is a top 5 team. And if you're telling me that, not all of the top 5 teams in the ACC make the NCAA tournament, I'm going to shake my head and walk away from the conversation. But let's flip the argument. Obviously, there is a huge talking point that with Trevon Brazile going back to Arkansas, Ugonna Onyenso to Kansas State, it seems like Louisville is in a very good position to be in the mix for Coleman Hawkins. There's rumors that he could be visiting at the end of this week. If you were to add Coleman Hawkins, obviously, since you and I both think Louisville is a tournament team, what's the difference in ceiling there? Like, where's your expectations now, and how did they change by adding a player like that?
Well, obviously, by adding a player like that, that just gives you a little bit more confidence. The reason why there are Louisville fans out there that still are unsure, I think it's very simple. Every time things have looked like they were going to go in a good direction the past 8-9 years, they've went the opposite way. We had a bunch of new players in a top 5 recruiting class last year. They just didn't mesh. So people could very easily, even with me, I've been burnt so much in the past that initially my thought is, well, this is a top 25 team. But I've been fooled. Obviously, the last couple of years has damaged a lot of people's not only thought process, but even, their way of thinking. So I want to initially be like, well, we'll get 18 to 20 wins, but that's just me literally downselling it. At this point, the only thing, in my opinion, that could be a downside is if Pat Kelsey's coaching style and his staff doesn't transition to being a ACC caliber coaching staff. I don't see that to be the case. I haven't seen anything yet that leads me to believe that he's a small-time coach. It's crazy to believe he was like 13th on the list, and this is who we end up with, and we're happy with it. We didn't – yeah, sure, we had to be talked into it initially for about a day, and then after hearing him and seeing him go straight to work, I don't see any situation where this would be a downside. So not making the tournament, the only way we could not make the tournament is if there's similar situations as there was the last 2 years where you've got guys behind the scenes, whether it's guys behind the scenes making trouble or just them not knowing how to talk, practice, communicate, because they're seeing that kind of example coming from the top. I don't think that's an issue at all this year. I think they see the confidence exuding from the head man, Coach Kloman, and he's the guy that I've have started getting to know a little better. Phenomenal dude. He really knows his stuff. I'm sure the other guys are too. I just haven't got to know them yet, but I just don't see a situation. You told me from the jump, you're like, well, let's talk about why we're not going to make the tournament. The only way we don't make the tournament, in my opinion, is if the NCAA comes back and is like, you're not playing this year. I don't see a situation or a situation or a scenario. I was trying to combine the two words where we don't make the tournament this year.
Thanks for absolutely just taking my talking points for the second segment, throwing them in the first, man. Dude's throwing me a curveball right out of the gate. I would agree, though. I think that a lot would have to go fairly wrong to take this team out of the tournament field and out of tournament consideration. But I mean, I suppose it is possible. So we'll discuss some of the common rebuttals here shortly. But sort of wrapping up this segment, I feel like I agree. It's a lot of, I won't say, I guess you could say buyer's remorse, to where, a lot of people bought into the past couple seasons and, regret doing so because they feel like they got burned, sort of like how you did, but on a lesser scale. Not to mention this is a brand new team, so there is some concern there. But overall, I feel like you have one of the more talented rosters in the ACC. And like I said, if you were a top 5 team in the ACC, you were going to make the NCAA tournament. I was having a conversation with somebody that said, well, look at how they're treating people in football. Man, this is way, way different than football. You really can't even make the comparisons there because of the perception of both conferences, football and basketball, are way, way different. ACC might be down over the past couple seasons, but you see the conference consistently have a ton of long-term success throughout the season and things of that nature. But last question I had before we shift gears a little bit. If Louisville adds Coleman Hawkins, do you think that they can keep the rest of the roster intact, or do you think 1 to 2 guys leaves?
What a great – first off, I apologize. I thought you asked me at the end of that first question what would make you think that we wouldn't make the tournament. So I apologize for reiterating the second segment, but I know you're going to be able to work around that just fine. But that's a great question. I don't think anybody has sat here and thought, well, other than you, or maybe a couple of diehards that are like, well, wonder if – I haven't even thought about if somebody would leave. Maybe Frank leaves. I don't see a guy like Kaysen leaving or James Scott. I don't know. Waterman wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
I don't. Again, at that point, it's really about what have they got worked out. Are they going – me and you both have heard rumors for about 5 weeks now that they're in order to potentially add somebody, they were going to transition somebody to a walk-on role with the program. So I don't think that person leaves, especially if they're the rumored person we heard who will be redshirted, which we won't say the name or anything. But I don't know. I think Coach Kelsey has probably got these guys so jacked up and bought in to the program. I don't know that anybody does leave, but it also wouldn't surprise me. You know, at the end of the day, all these guys have come to Louisville. They've been told what they were expected, what was expected out of them. And for that to just blow up because somebody else comes in, I mean, I probably would reconsider myself. But this guy, Coach Kelsey, man, it just seems like he's I don't want to say a wizard, but he's got some magic to him, man. Every time he opens his mouth, it's like when you see that guy that plays the flute and the snakes come up out of the hats or whatever. That's what he has Card Nation doing. We are clinging on to every word. So I can see a situation where everybody stays, honestly.
And that is the hope is that you don't lose anyone, because with a system that puts so much emphasis on mass substitutions and playing really quickly and playing fast, you want to have as many players as you can, especially with 2 guys redshirting. But I do want to flip the script now. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on what some of the common rebuttals are. Why would people suggest that Louisville will not make the tournament? Why are there some that are more hesitant than others? Will sort of try to explain why that is coming up here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It has all the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Look, it's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're simply looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire a professional like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Also, Dalton is brought to you by Teddy Bridgewater and the cover of NCAA 14. No, I'm just kidding. It's not.
Hey, that's dope. But, hey, man, second segment officially being kicked off by our excitement for the new NCAA football game coming out. I do have to get a new PlayStation because I'm a cheap guy and I still have a PS4. I need a PS5.
I don't think that's cheap at all. I just bought my PlayStation 5 2 weeks ago. So
all right, so great minds think alike. I'm glad we're on the same page here. And we're also on the same page about the tournament. Some people, however, are not. And you went into your sort of justification as to why people might be a little hesitant is that's because of PTSD. That's because of buyer's remorse. That's because of, people feeling a little bit concerned with a brand new roster. I also think another thing, and this is more so maybe not the local landscape, but definitely the national, some people just flat out aren't believers in the roster that the Cardinals are putting together. They think, it's got some decent pieces, but the Cardinal fans are more bullish on their roster than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's because it's with the lack of big names. There's one or two big names in there, but the thing is when you gather a bunch of sixth man or defensive player of the years and this and that, it may not look like a splashy roster on paper, but when you start, you go and you ask, like we do on the show on Sundays, we ask, well, what's your starting five? And somebody gives a five really, really quick, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. You got to put Hadley in there. Oh, well, I forgot. You got to put Scott in there. It's like, it's a good problem to have. You've got too many options. So, but yeah, I could absolutely, if you took the name Louisville off here and we hadn't got any of these guys committed and you showed me this roster of guys without Hawkins on it and said, this is who y'all are going to end up with. If I was just a casual basketball watcher and I looked at the school's names and everybody's averages and stuff, it's not a splashy resume on paper. But when you go and you start like me and you do, we go and we watch game film and we start looking at the accolades and we got guys like Hadley and Corin Johnson and just to name a few that are award winners in other conferences. And then, gosh, the second guy, not the you're going to have to help me because I forgot the third guy we got.
That guy, yeah.
No, we got two Charleston guys, and then we got like a defensive player of the year, and I forgot which one that is.
Are you talking about from Charleston?
No. Well, was one of those Charleston guys a defensive player of the year in the conference?
No.
Okay. Well, regardless, we got the third guy we signed was like a player. Was like
Boubacar Traore, Chucky Hepburn.
No, it was before those two. That was like numbers 4 and 5.
Rain Smith, James Scott.
Who?
James Scott.
Was James Scott from Charleston, or is he not from Charleston?
He was from Charleston, but he only played like 8-9 minutes a game.
Okay. Well, you get players of the year, and start to you get a little bit. I'm trying to stall for a second so I can. Terrence Edwards Jr. is who I was thinking of. Oh
yeah, the Sun Belt Player of the Year.
Yeah. So you get all these guys, and you add a couple of flashy names in there too, and it's like, okay. But another reason people are worried is it's the chemistry. Will they gel? A lot of different number ones for all their teams or number twos. Can they all get along? Can they all get together? But I feel like with Coach Kelsey, he's going to be able to get the guys wrangled in. You talk about the naysayers, but I just don't. I mean, I'll listen to your argument. I don't, other than just the guys not gelling and not being able to play together. I don't see any other reason that could even be a possibility why this team wouldn't make the tournament.
Another rebuttal before we get into the mailbag is the uncertainty around Pat Kelsey. Until a mid-major coach that has not won an NCAA tournament game, I might add, to be fair, until a mid-major coach shows that he can do the right things at the Power 5 level, there will forever be hesitancy, and we've seen some damn good mid-major coaches just fizzle out at the Power 5 for one reason or another. So I think that is a common rebuttal as well. I do think that Kelsey's system will be able to translate over, as do the rest of the Louisville fan base. But truthfully, the only thing that's going to cure some of these rebuttals is simply going to be getting the wins and the losses on the court. But Jeremy, there are some great questions in the mailbag that I'm going to ask that the listeners have proposed. We'll do that here coming up after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. The NBA Finals is coming up. The Stanley Cup is right around the corner. There's no better time to get in on the action. Once again, that's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Already into the final segment of this late Tuesday evening edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Jeremy Wahman, co-founder and editor of CardinalSportsZone.com, joining us in the virtual studio today. A couple of great questions. Like I said, I'm not used to asking these and having someone else answer them, but I'm interested to hear some of your inputs on these. So, with the issues of baseball, do you feel like I can already see you kind of shaking your head at this question, but it was the first question on the mailbag. With the issues of baseball, do you think that a lot of Louisville fans are falling victim to the grass isn't always greener syndrome? So I guess basically the question is saying, do you think people are thinking that the alternative to Dan McDonnell not being here next year is going to be better than him being here?
Man, it's hard because it almost feels like Dan has fallen into the except without the championships, the Denny Crum trajectory, where he was very, very successful for the first 15 years or so, and then he had a back end of his career here where people were just like, well, he built this, let him stay. He built this, let him stay. And Dan's fallen into that. Do we know why? Do we know why he feels the way he does about everything? You know, the rumors are he's not embracing the portal. We still don't have that practice area that we were promised. He's talking about recruiting suffering. So I'm willing to give him more time, and I understand. And I was talking to one of the baseball members of the baseball I don't know what you would call it. Not a player, but one of the support staff members. And he was like, man, I always longed for the day where the basketball and football fans started cheering for the baseball team. But now you see those same people. We've become a bigger deal. And those same people that we wanted are the ones that are just annihilating us every day on social media. So it's what you asked for. You got the extra support. Now you got to deal with them acting like 4-year-olds online. I don't have a problem with giving Dan McDonnell a little more time as long as he shows that he's willing to make some changes. He needs to make staff changes. He's a loyal guy. Very highly unlikely that he doesn't make the change we all know he needs to make. It's difficult because
right.
He come here and he turned. Before he got here, we played in a grass-filled field that had one small scoreboard, and it was fenced in with like regular house fence. And then the stadium was built. We got him. Lalo Prado was out. He comes in, transforms the program into something we never thought we would see. And you want to give him the opportunity to turn things around, but he's got to at least appear as if he's willing to do that. I don't. Yeah. But to answer your question, I don't want anybody else here next year. I want Dan here. I want him to show that he's willing to make the changes that need to be made. I'm not one of these guys, and you know this because you've been on the other shows with me before. I'm not throw a guy away every 4 years guy. I want that guy to be able to come in, players in, get his culture in, get things running his way, and then give him a couple of years, and if he fails, he fails. But my college coach here at Louisville, Coach Ron Cooper, we went to a bowl his first year. We had a fairly decent second year, and then we went 1-11 his third year, and they immediately fired him. The next 3 years, we went to bowls and had some of the greatest players in Louisville history on those teams.
Yeah.
A little patience would be okay, but I don't know if he's not willing to make the changes, then you know what they say, Dalton, if you can't change the people around you, change the people around you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm right there with you. I'd rather Dan figure it out than have to, plan for a life after Dan. But it is what it is. you can only name one player. Who is the men's basketball player that you are excited for the most to be in Cardinal red?
Oh, that's a great question. Chucky. I think it's got to be Chucky, because I think the reason I say that is because everybody else you kind of see what you're gonna get, and with Chucky, he looks like a guy that's just ready to burst on the scene and make next level plays. He looks like a guy that's going to be all ACC first or second team. So that's the guy I'm looking forward to as far as the fundamentals and the execution. As far as just a fun basketball player, it's got to be Kason Pryor.
Yeah, I would think you would have to say this last question is literally like right up your alley, and I'm so glad that it is in the mailbag.
Okay.
Because because you have obviously a better relationship with them than I, but how much of a difference? Let me preface it. There's a statement before. The statement is there have been former players that have been a part of this staff for the past however long. Realistically, how much of a difference will having Peyton Siva on the men's basketball staff mean, not only for this team but for the program moving forward?
Well, Peyton sucks. He's not really that good. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be it's going to be a big difference maker, because not only does this guy talk the talk, he walks the walk. He's an ambassador in every way. These kids look up to him. Even last year's players, for about the first month after the season was over with, and this was before he was named a part of the team. They were looking to him for guidance. They respect him. There's been a couple of players that committed that have been like, oh, like they've tweeted out, can't believe I get to work with Peyton Siva. So I think it's going to be a huge difference maker. He's willing to give you the shirt off of his back, and he loves this university. So I think it's going to, when it's all said and done, all the additions and subtractions, team personnel wise, I think right there at number one is going to be Pat Kelsey. Right there at 1A is Peyton Siva.
That's really, really good insight, because I think that, Peyton Siva is also a newer player, or in the grand scheme of things. And this is no disrespect whatsoever to Reese Gaines. People my age remember guys like Peyton Siva more than Reese Gaines, just because of age, because of, I was a freshman in high school and we won it all, Jeremy. Me being the Louisville fan I remember going back and watching the entire Reese Gaines show-out game after the fact, because I was too young to watch it then. Don't shake your head at me. It's a sign of the times, man. And pretty soon, there already is a younger generation that now does not even know Louisville basketball to be the powerhouse that it is, and that's why we got to get it back to where it needs to be.
This segment being brought to you by Phillips Hue. No, it's not. I'm just kidding. No, you're right. And for all those people that, to your point, even more, like I was a little kid when Kenny Payne played for Louisville. So I don't remember much of him here as a basketball player. Of course, if you've listened to our show at all, you know that him and my dad were cool. So I knew him in person, but I didn't really know him. So, yeah, more relatable. If you get somebody that's been here within the last 10, 11 years, they're definitely going to be more relatable. And, yes, they will be the players that these kids watched when they were growing up as well. So, yeah, I get the point.
That is true. Well, that is going to wrap up this late Tuesday evening of the show. Jeremy, appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you coming on to the show. Definitely will start having you back on more now that you have overcome some of your challenges, but glad to have you back in the saddle, my man. Card Nation needs you. We'll be right back coming up here very soon. I say like I'll be back tomorrow, but it is the off season for Locked On Louisville. So truthfully, I don't know when I'm going to be back, but I'll try to let you know when I do.